The U.S. dual-track policy towards Iran will fail and must change. The U.S. pressure policy to persuade Iran to stop its nuclear program makes sense from a Western perspective. The expectation is that pressures will cripple the Islamic Republic, and as the regime realizes that its survival is threatened, it will concede. However, this assessment is based on a profound misunderstanding of the Iranian society, culture, and politics. More significantly, it is oblivious to the Iranian national pride. Let me repeat, the Iranian national pride. As native of Iran, with extensive experience with the Iranian culture and politics, as well as its Islamic leaders, I am persuaded that neither pressure from the US and its allies nor war threats from Israel will make Tehran bend. A war against the Islamic Republic will be even more counterproductive, as it will unite Iran under a more radicalized leadership, weakens its opposition, and sways Tehran to build nuclear bombs. Contrary to the prevailing view, Tehran's resistance to calls for a compromise solution is not due to its desire to build bombs, not at least as yet. Despite crippling sanctions, Iran has not, unlike North Korea, left the Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, and it has allowed monitoring of its facilities by the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA. Iran even suspended enrichment in 2003 and implemented the IAEA's additional protocol for snap inspections. The real reason for Tehran's stubbornness is the dual-track policy itself. Before the policy is a solution, it is a problem, as it has injured the Iranian respect. National pride is the driving force of Iran's nuclear program, and the main reason for the Islamic Republic's resistance to demands for its suspension. Indeed, the nuclear program is often equated to the oil nationalization in 1950s. As a survey in 2011 by the Rand Corporation found, over 90% of the Iranians maintain that the possession of civilian nuclear technology is a national right, and I may add, a national pride. Leaders of the Islamic Republic have frequently condemned the so-called carrot and stick policy, that is the US dual-track policy, and the tone, quote-unquote, of American officials as, quote-unquote, disrespectful and derogatory. The terms carrot and stick are applied to donkey animal in Iran. Obama's televised message in 2009 for a new beginning, quote-unquote, could have led to a breakthrough if it were not accompanied by, quote-unquote, terror and, quote-unquote, arms accusations. But the message, again, according to Tehran, displayed the carrot and stick policy. The Supreme Leader Khamenei immediately rejected the overture, saying, quote-unquote, they congratulate the Iranian New Year, but at the same time accuse Iran of supporting terrorism and efforts to gain access to nuclear weapons. Our nation hates threat and enticement. That is exactly Khamenei's words. Adding insult to injury is Iran's historic mistrust of the US, a perception that has led to the Islamic Republic's constant fear of regime change by the US. Indeed, Khamenei strongly holds that under, quote-unquote, bullying and intimidation, the way, quote-unquote, to succeed is to not retreat from the enemy, not even one step, end of the quote. The Islamic leaders in Tehran worry that suspending the nuclear program, quote, under coercion would open the door to more coercion and demand of concessions, end of the quote, by the US, leading to, quote, the regime's collapse, end of the quote. Advocates of the dual-track policy might argue that, regardless, under relentless sanctions, once the Islamic regime's survival is threatened, it would have no choice but to surrender. This argument disregards serious risks. First, an endangered theocratic regime inspired by the Shia culture of resistance to coercion would in all likelihood take retaliatory actions against the US and its allies in the region. This would lead to a war that, in Secretary Panetta's words, quoting, quote, we would regret. Second, for the sanctions to threateningly weaken the government in Tehran, time is needed. Under this condition, Iran will find enough time to build nuclear arms if indeed it intends to do so. Last, if sanctions fail to make Tehran surrender, pressures will build for war as the last resort. As Zbigniew Brzezinski has put it, quote unquote, the more you lean towards compulsion, the more the choice becomes war if it does not work. If the US wants a diplomatic settlement of the nuclear dispute with Iran, it must abandon its delusion that the dual-track approach will ever work. Instead, it must adjust its current policy by adopting a realistic approach that is more sensitive to the Iranian cultural norms and political realities, its national pride in particular. The adjustment will require that, first, the US abandon the language of threat and intimidation, replacing it with a respectful tone. Second, the US alleviate Tehran's fear of regime change by abandoning the quote-unquote all options are on the table mantra. And third, the US support a nuclear-free Middle East, a move that can indeed bring Israel and Iran into an indirect, if not direct, and overdue dialogue. Finally, given the reasons I have enumerated above and Iran's investment of labor and money in its nuclear program, zero enrichment is not a realistic option. Instead, the policy must focus on intrusive monitoring of Iran's nuclear sites. Iran will accept this condition, and it may even accept a face-saving partial suspension as long as the perceived bullying, quote-unquote, US policy is abandoned. Let us hope that US will consider a change in its policy and that the peace will again prevail among all involved in this dispute. Thank you for watching to this video, and good day.